Welcome to In the Skies of Love, a critical review podcast about the anime series Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I'm Kamel, a newcomer to this revered series and your companion on this adventure. Joining me are Tom and Joel, two diehard fans of the show. Each week we'll review and analyze an episode, exploring its characters, plot, and themes, and asking new questions about this influential TV show. So please join us on our journey through the skies of love. So what are we doing? We're covering episodes 16 and 17 this week, yeah?
Yes, yep. It's good to be back. I've been pretty on the ball about recording, so it's quite nice to be I feel like we're in the zone now, and watching episodes fast enough that I still remember the previous episodes, which makes a big change.
Does make a difference.
It's good because when these are edited and released, they won't know the difference that we spent ages.
Exactly,
away.
Yeah. Okay, I'll read the synopsis for episode 16 with every typo. Episode 16. Oh, sorry?
Nothing.
Okay, thanks for interrupting me, Tom.
Go ahead, yeah.
Episode 16.
Actually, before you...
New trends.
No, go for it, yeah.
Episode 16, New Trends. I'm going to take that again. I had to cough.
Where is did you put the title of these things in? Where is the title?
I didn't put the title in. No, I'm going to... There we go.
Wow.
And there we go. All right,
perfect.
Take 5. Yeah.
Mm.
Episode 16, New Trends. End of the Battle of Amritsar, Yang Wenli's 13th Fleet keeps the Imperial fleet at bay, allowing Vice Admiral Alexandra Bucock to withdraw the remaining fleets. After that, Yang manages to escape destruction, once again, in brackets. Meanwhile, Kaiser Friedrich IV passes away without appointing an heir. Reinhardt teams up with the Minister of State, Klaus von Lichtenlard, in order to crown Erwin Joseph II, one of the late Emperor's 3 grandchildren. Oh, full stop. Okay. Duke Otto von Braunschweig and Marquis Wilhelm von Littenheim, fathers of the 2 others, prepare to dispute this arrangement. Back in the Free Planets Alliance, Job Trunheit assumes the position of Supreme Chairman of the High Council, Bucock as commander of the Space Fleet, and Yang as commander of Isilon Fortress. Yang takes all his staff from the 13th Fleet, reorganized as the Isilon Garrison Fleet, with him, together with Dusty Attenborough, Nguyen Van Hu, and the new orderly Julian Mintz, and hopes to have Alex Kazerne appointed as Fortress Administrator. Finally, in Fazan, Adrian Rubinsky takes his orders from the Grand Bishop of the Terrorist Church, or as it's so accurately spelled here, Terrorist Church, without a second R.
That's right? It should be spelled like that, right? Terror.
I know it's like a pun on terror, like Earth, but I thought it would be terrorist, not terror. When I first saw it, I wanted to read it as terrorist, you know?
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay. But then the pun wouldn't, But yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Thoughts on this episode? Bit of a slow one.
It was a bit slow, but kind of a lot happens, I felt like. You're introduced to a new faction, some new characters or new roles for different characters.
Yep.
And then the Kaiser just dies like 10 minutes in.
Yeah. I guess an important episode, yeah. Like, we have a lot of key events that will shape the episodes to come. But after the huge kind of blowout of the Battle of Amritsar, this one felt like a real change of pace.
I love this episode. I thought it was great. It feels like a repilot. It feels like they've ended the first arc, and then they were like, okay, we've hired a new overall art designer, we've hired a new writer, we've, or establishing these new factions and new the status quo of the show is changing, everyone's getting new jobs. And I think it speaks to a larger point about how, like, despite the utter catastrophic military failure that this operation from the FPA was, they just jiggle some roles around and nothing really changes. The apparatus doesn't change. just people's roles move around, which I think speaks to that point that they're making about how war never changes, but also it allows them to start telling a kind of a different story.
Mhm.
And I thought it was interesting that I'll jump around slightly, but with they set up the Lohengram's deep hatred for the Kaiser for kidnapping his sister, essentially, and how everything he's organized in his life has been around getting enough power to then get revenge on the Kaiser for what he did to his sister.
Yep.
And then the Kaiser just dies in the background, like God laughed, and so his plans came to nothing. And in another TV show, that would have been like a huge dramatic scene where he confronts the Kaiser in the dead of night and like stabs him through the heart or something. And this is not that show. It's just these major events happen in the background, and then you just gotta, they just get lost to history. These events, like your plans do not matter in the long grand scheme of things, despite that being the bulk of what the show is about, like moment to moment.
Yeah, I think this kind of reinforces what I was saying before of the show being written like history, right? Like the kind of goals and the plots and the motivations of the characters, they just kind of fall flat in the face of just fate randomly swinging a scythe and the Kaiser just dying. Because Reinhardt throws a strop about this in this episode, right? Like he gets told that the Kaiser is dead, and he says, "Oh, if he had lived for 2 more years, I could have had my revenge. I could have given him what he deserved." And it's like, but you don't get to. The show, or the universe of the show doesn't pay out in that way.
And he has to then kind of, it's almost like you think that he have to find some new motivation to move forwards with his job or whatever. Like the old idea is gone, but actually by this point you kind of see that he's come so far and he has his own ideas about more than just the revenge that he wanted to have the Kaiser or to get his sister away from this position that she was forced into. So that when the Kaiser dies, he does throw a strop and he's like a bit miffed by it all, but then he just kind of carries on. He's like, well, okay, we still got a lot of stuff to do and I still have a lot of plans. So that's what we're going to do.
I mean, ambition is a gas, right? It's just going to fill whatever space you give it or it has available to it. As he kind of flies past his original goal of killing the Kaiser and getting revenge, his ambition is too great to be contained by this one plot or this one scheme. So the story must go on.
The irony, or maybe not irony, or like in comparison, Yang Wenli has no ambition to ascend the way he has, but mirroring Lowengram, he's now the youngest admiral in the history of the FPA. He's running Isilon Fortress, and he didn't want any of it. He makes a speech in the following episode about how, dude, this sucks. I didn't want to do any of this. Military is stupid. Don't ever do it. And yet he's better at it than almost anyone, seemingly.
Yeah. Well, he has a speech in this episode, right near the beginning, where he asks whether, or he says that there's like 2 great forces in history. One is people who believe that there are ideals worth dying for or that are more important than human life. And then the other group of people who think human life is always more sacred than any ideal. And he basically is like, oh yeah, we just keep repeating this story over and over again. The people who believe something's worth dying for end up, they start the war. And then the other side feels vindicated when the war ends because they feel it's a victory for the sanctity of life. And we're just destined to repeat this struggle forever.
I have that. I have that summarized in my notes. Not with the clarity that you managed to remember. Mine just says Yang gets philosophical, and then he apologizes, and then he gets brandy. But I did make a note of the same.
He me for real. Yeah.
I did not get a sense of you guys said it was a bit of a slow one, and I think I understand what you mean, but also it felt like you did say a huge amount of things happened. So
yeah, right.
one thing that speaks to, I think, when you say it, reminds you of how history is written, is that
Mm.
sometimes when you read a history of something, it is difficult to understand the span of time that is being discussed in the events. Like
Yeah.
it's unless they're being hyper specific with every date of specific events, you feel like time compresses down massively, or is larger than it seems. And so
Yeah.
if like they escaped and then they're back, and then the whole military apparatus changes roles. Lohengrin becomes Marquis. The Kaiser dies. Trunicht similarly, like we made a big deal about how he had this plan in action. That's why he allowed this military operation to go through while not throwing his support in the ring for it. And then the consequences of those choices is a throwaway line from the narrator because it was inevitable.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no dramatic
Yeah.
conclusion to, he doesn't wave in front of 10,000 people that he's just been elected head of the government. But
Yeah. Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah. It does feel to me that the show is a lot more confident in this episode about just presenting the facts of the story. Like there's no, as you said, there's no dwelling on the fact that this quote unquote master stroke of Trunheit paid off, because we already knew it was always going to. So we don't waste any time kind of reveling in it. But yes, yeah, it does feel like history. It's interesting that you say like it's hard to get a sense of how far away things are in history. Yeah, speaking of that, it's very weird. Like I had time to read a couple of blogs about this episode, and it's been a year and a half now since the story of the show started. Like the dates we get given at the beginning of the show are like a year and a half in the past. That was quite surprising, and also surprised the writer of the blog.
It's probably been about a year and a half since we did our review of the first episode. So.
We're watching it in real time.
Yeah, we're watching it as it truly happened. Yeah.
I just think it's interesting that you said it felt a bit like a new pilot or something, like we were starting again almost. Because with this like reshuffling of roles, I feel like it was important to have this build up to this point so you could see what was going on in the alliance government before someone like Trunheit could come into the position that he's in. Now we have quite a good understanding of like what he's like and how that could happen, and also what the military was like before this reorganization, which I think is quite important context. And I think the same thing happened already in the Empire side, where we saw in those initial battles the generals who were all very incompetent, and then they all ended up getting dismissed, and you see Lohengrin's rise, and now he's reorganized the Empire's military, and it's way more competent and effective now. And he was, like the guys that he has under his command are all very very talented. Even the one who messed up a bit in the last couple of episodes, who was reprieved just about.
Yeah, we should talk about Bittenfeld and his arc, but I feel like that, to me, that is kind of the central axis of Lohengram's story in this episode, right? Bittenfeld's fuck up and the resulting kind of events that follow. But I think I talked before about Lohengrin being kind of loosely based on Napoleon, right? Like, and Napoleon did a similar thing, right? Like of elevating competent commanders into his military and replacing the aristocratic, like French nobility who were just sitting on those positions. And interestingly, I was reading some books a while ago about like the American Revolution, and this is cited as historians as one of the reasons why the British Army failed to like crush the American Revolution, was because there was never this restructuring of the army within the British aristocracy. So clearly, there's references to history going on in this like reorganization of the military.
I read that it's interesting because my understanding of knowledge about Western history in the last couple of centuries is minimal. I get it mostly from like Assassin's Creed video games. So it's crazy to me you're not mentioning the Templars and the Assassins right now in what you're talking about.
Who obviously played a key role throughout the whole thing. But
I'll come into the show later. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But the way I read that scene where he really just dumps on what's the name of the Imperial guy who messed up?
Bittenfeld.
Bittenfeld. When Lonegram punishes him, then struts off, and Kirkegeist comes up to him and is like, "Who are you really angry at?" And I got the impression from what Lonegram's talking about is that he's not angry he messed up. He's angry that you embarrassed me in front of Yang Wenli. Like that's how it read to me. Like, I'm trying to impress him, okay, and you're embarrassing me in front of him.
For me, this scene was the best in the whole episode. Like this interaction between Kirkegeist and Lowengram and everything leading up to it. Kind of like the post-battle cool down on the Imperial side was so interesting and revealing to watch for the different characters involved. There's the bit when it's just funny, I guess, when Bittenfeld walks into the room. First of all, Kirkegeist walks into the room and like Lowengram comes down from the dais to basically embrace him, but because they're in front of everyone, he just like pats him on the shoulder, and it's so sweet, but it's also so awkward. Like he just sort of like just places it like it's like it's adorable. But then when Bittenfeld comes in after Kirkegeist, Lowengram does this swish of his cape. Which it was so unnecessary, and it must have taken real time to animate, but it was deemed important enough that it had to stay on the show. It was very, very funny.
There was a lot of good cape action in this episode. Actually, like he's throwing his cape all over the place, strutting around the place. And there was another guy later on who he pulls out of being part of the plot to rival Lowengram for the control of the Empire, whereas the other guys are going to try and scheme against him and put someone else on the throne or something. And he also has an incredible cloak that he and they pass each other on the steps. And I don't know. I just thought the cloaks were very good and noticeable in this episode.
Yeah, extremely good cloaks.
That guy was the previous head of the Imperial military, right?
Yes,
yeah, I think so.
I think he's one of the guys that Lowengram showed mercy to in a previous episode, right? When they were going to be, it was the three of them, and they were going to be ousted for their incompetence. And Lowengram was like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll get their position on a whim. It's not a big deal." And then, Lowengram, and behold, 3 episodes later, he has the position.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny in that scene. The Admiral is coming down the stairs, and Lowengram and Kirkegeist are going up the stairs.
Whoa!
And it's like, whoa! It's like a symbol, or a metaphor or something, man.
Yeah. That's clever. You wouldn't get that in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's subtle, but if you're paying attention, you can see it.
I totally missed it.
A lot of walking up and down stairs we've established. To go back to the previous scene you were talking about, where he comes down off the dais or the altar or whatever it is.
Well, so he comes down from the dais and he tells Bittenfeld basically, when we get home, I'm gonna tell everyone about your crimes, and then you're going to be held accountable. But for now, you're just confined to your quarters.
Yeah, go to your room.
Bittenfeld is, go to your room. You're grounded. Bittenfeld is obviously beside himself with shame or guilt, I guess. He's like a rash man, but I don't think he's without shame. And then Kirkegeist basically follows Lowengram into the corridor, and Oberstein is like watching him, and I think it's this episode, right, where he warns Kirkegeist, just because you're friends with Lowengram, don't think that you're going to get any special favors.
I think it's an internal. It might have been an internal monologue to himself. Actually, I think Oberstein says it to himself.
Is it? It's internal. Okay.
Yeah. So he's thinking to himself, just because you're his best friend, don't think I hope you don't think you're more privileged or something like this. a little bit tense.
Going back through the show from the beginning, this is like astonishing to me that Oberstein has so miscalculated the relationship between Kirkiais and Lowengram. And I feel like because, as we talked about, he's kind of this Machiavellian character, like a schemer, someone who doesn't really have a position or any loyalty to anyone. It's kind of a blind spot for him, right? Like this extreme loyalty that Lowengram and Kirkiais have for one another. I don't know if you interpreted it the same way, but this for me was a bit of a surprise.
I think going back and seeing this again, it's a bit difficult to know how to say without referencing what happens in later episodes. But I think that my first reading of it was, and I think it's still maybe the correct one. I don't know. I don't know what you think. Is that he's a bit annoyed by it. He's like, well, you better not think you're better than everyone else is because you're his friend. Like that's going to end badly for you because I don't think that's fair and I'm not going to put up with it. But I think there's an alternate reading of, I hope you don't think you're more privileged than the rest of us because you're his friend. I don't really care, but it might get you into trouble. Like more concern for Kirkiais than him, Oberstein himself, being jealous or something like this.
I kind of read it as closer to the first one, but like I say, I kind of read it as because Oberstein can't imagine having a friendship that survives this kind of environment because he's a schemer and doesn't hold loyalty to anyone. That he's just projecting, right? Like he sees Kirkiais as a fellow schemer, someone who is trying to get ahead and is using his relationship with Lowengram to basically rise further than he should do. And that's why Oberstein is frustrated with him.
A third approach.
Here's a fourth approach, which is that I always get the sense the reason Lowengram took Oberstein on was because he sees something of himself in him, in that they are both self-interest is hugely important to them. I think it's even more important to Oberstein than Lowengram. And the blind spot that Oberstein has in regards to Kirkiais, this is his relationship with Lowengram, is that Lowengram's, besides his self-interest, the only two things he cares about is his sister and Kirkiais. So, and that's not something Oberstein can comprehend as a principle that Lowengram has, a hard line that he sets.
Right. Yep. I think he definitely sees it as weakness, right, rather than strength. This relationship that the two of them have on Lowengram's side, because we see that in episode 17, the next one, where he tries to. We get going all the way to the end of episode 17, but they are connected. Where he tries to persuade Lowengram not to give special favors to Kirkiais, not to protect him, not to treat him as different from the other admirals. Think about Royenthal and Mittermeier. What will they think? Which is pretty pathetic. But I think he sees it as a weakness, not as a strength.
Yeah, I think we're going to be doing this a lot with Oberstein over the course of the show, like coming up with 4 or 5 different things that he might be he might mean when he says any given thing. He's very controlled about what he says or what he's even shown to think in the show to himself.
Yeah.
And I think we've already done that in previous episodes as well.
There's another character who exhibits similar qualities in terms of how they present themselves to different parties, and then what they value beyond anything else is their own self-interest, is Lex Luthor himself, Adrian Rubinsky, and his secret meeting behind a bookcase, which that scene came out of nowhere to me. Like, secret bookcase, fine, cool, that seems normal enough. And then when Emperor Palpatine somehow showed up, I was fully blown away. I could not believe they did Rise of Skywalker again in 1989. I couldn't believe it. And then when they mentioned Terra, and then I remembered our conversation from a previous episode where I was like, Terra? And you were like, yeah, don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize it become a major plot point. I thought this was just like a long lost lore point, something to find in the wiki, not.
No, yeah, I didn't want to spoil you on the Earth thing. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Good. But yeah, that scene came out of nowhere for me.
Yeah, we do have a third faction. Yeah, we do have a third faction introduced now after this episode, which again I think is why it feels a bit like a second pilot. Like the stakes have changed and the balance of power has changed, and you have this, you have your kind of secular empire, your republic, and then your religious, your theocratic like representation in the show, which, as far as I'm concerned, is all three political systems that there are. So I can't think of any others.
Now, I have a question or two about this scene, which is
there was one or two.
Did they name who that character was? The Palpatine?
Grand Bishop.
Pretty sure he's called the Space Pope.
He's called the Grand Bishop, which is not far off.
No, he's a Grand Bishop, yeah.
Right, okay.
You can call him Space Pope if you want.
This Grand Wizard of the Terra, do they... It seemed like Rubinsky was like loyal to, or presented himself as loyal to him, or working for him, or it wasn't. Fezan started as a colony of Terra or something like that, but it's under Imperial control. I wasn't sure about.
But all three of the factions believe that they created Fezan, right? Like the Empire believe that Fezan is, because it's technically a part of Fezan. They're like, oh, it's an Imperial colony that's a little bit wayward and it's got its own thing going on. The Republic are like, we trade so much with Fezan, we've basically created all of their wealth. And then the, Holy Terror or whatever, think that, they created it as by working in the shadows. So basically all three of them have this claim of being the founder of Fezan. And obviously Rubinsky's having none of it. He's just self-interested. I don't think he has any special loyalty to Space Pope.
Yeah. Okay. That all makes sense to me. Now, my second question was, when I watched that scene, my impression was this emperor, the Space Pope, the Grand Bishop, he was communicating from Terra, and that Terra itself was a colony. But then the following episode, when we see the terrorists who were on their march, it felt like they wanted to go back to Terra, that they did not know where Terra. It felt like Battlestar Galactica, where they're looking for Earth and they don't know where it is. Like it's the promised Holy Land, and therefore we can't find it.
Well, Bucock says that Earth is on the other side of Imperial territory, right? So, like, I think it's probably not so much that people don't know where it is; it's just that nobody's allowed to go. And we have a little cutaway to Fezan with the merchant captain, who confusingly in my subs I think was also called Konev, who is another character.
Right, that was confusing. Yeah,
weird. It was confusing. Yeah, this is a different Konev. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. All right. I was a bit confused by this.
Yeah, he was a merchant, a merchant sailor or whatever, merchant captain, and he's been asked to transport some pilgrims, presumably, but I don't remember if we find out, presumably from Republic territory through Imperial territory. So I don't think it's so much that they don't know where it is. It's just that, it's on the other side of a massive empire. Hard to get to. Yeah.
Whether the Grand Bishop is there or elsewhere, I'm pretty sure we find out what he's up to in more detail at some point. But
I think it becomes a plot point, right?
Yeah, but
where he is,
where he is right now is still a bit of a mystery.
Well,
but yeah, you do. I think you do kind of get the impression that maybe he is on Earth as he's talking to Rubinsky. I like the animation.
I wanted to roll back
he signs off. I like the animation where he signs off and like this hologram like leans in really close to Rubinsky, like he's like pointing
so funny.
His face. He's like, "Don't betray us."
Yeah, it's so funny because like on the other side, does he have like a hologram of Rubinsky, and is he like leaning into Rubinsky? Like into Rubinsky's hologram, and like, are they the same distance away? Like, it's just a hologram. You could be viewing this like it's just confusing to me. I don't know how this works.
Yeah. I don't know how it works. We were kind of explained quite a lot of things that did work in this episode that I wasn't really ready. Was it this episode or the next one? It was the one. It was on Isilon, and the narrator gave us like a big overview at the beginning about how all the different stuff it has, like the factories and the hydroponic farms, and
oh yeah.
That's the beginning of the second episode. Yeah.
Oh, is it the beginning of the second one? Okay, and it's got everything that.
Yeah, I guess we can.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I wanted to talk about.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
No,
you go.
No.
Okay, because I was gonna go back to a previous bit of the episode.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go? Okay. What
I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the conversation between Kirkhias and Lowengram, because I feel like it's the first time, because we've talked a bit about Kirkhias being very agreeable and just kind of going along with everything Lowengram wants, being very passive. But other characters, we get the suggestion that he is Lowengram's conscience, right? Like in the flashback with the rock and the slapping and all this kind of stuff. But we haven't seen that play out with the two of them as adults at any point. Mm-hmm. And this conversation to me was very strong. Like every part of it was clearly there was a lot of attention to detail on the facial expressions, particularly of Lowengram, like the animation. You can feel the emotions that he's going through as Kirkhias takes him through his reasoning. Like he has this little like strop, right? Like he like clenches his fists together when Kirkhias says, "Don't punish Bittenfeld. You can't afford to have enemies in your own camp as well as enemies in two other camps." And Lowengram like clenches his fists. He becomes angry at who? It's not really clear. Himself, Kirkhias, Bittenfeld, everyone at the same time. And then Kirkhias just like allows him to process the anger, and then like they continue to talk. And I read as a shout out to the writer of Icebergs, which is a Legend of the Galactic Heroes blog on Tumblr. It's very good. They talked about the fact that there's a scene in the previous episode when Lowengram gets angry at one of his staff members, and he like shouts at his staff member when he brings him the news of Bittenfeld's failure. I think this is the moment. And the camera pans over to Oberstein. Oberstein has his jaw open, right? Like he's like shocked to see Lowengram just flying off the handle. This kind of like rage that he has inside of him. And the person in the blog points out that Kirkhias doesn't do that, right? In this conversation, Kirkhias just sort of stands there and waits for this anger to subside, and then they return to their discussion. And I think the whole thing is very well written, well structured to sell you on the fact that their relationship really is something special, that Kirkhias is the only person who is able to do this with him, only person who is able to talk to him in this way and change his mind.
Do you think it's a progression? Because the reason I say that is that this is the first conversation they've had in a while where Kirkhias explicitly talks about his disapproval and to petition him to change his mind. And I think they've mentioned in previous episodes, going back a couple, where someone else comments on Kirkhias's lack of agreeability with Lowengram's plans. Like he'll do it, but he's not happy about it. And so it seems like they've set this up. Like, how far can he take this before Kirkhias does have to talk to him about it?
I think from my perspective, it's more that Kirkhias is clearly a very thoughtful person, is very careful with what he challenges Lowengram on. So he will like voice discomfort or voice his unhappiness about specific plans. But he does also trust Lowengram to make, he knows that Lowengram is to whatever extent a genius compared to him, and trusts him to make good calls in these circumstances. But knows that there are, red lines where he'll act with rage or act emotionally that Kirkhias needs to protect him from, like we see in the flashback with the rock, and like we see now where he wants to punish Bittenfeld, which obviously is the right thing to do legally in the system they're in, but Kirkhias knows that they can't afford that. So he calms him down. So I don't think it's a progression in terms of a line has been crossed. It's more about being careful about what you challenge and when you challenge it. That Kirkei seems very good at.
You did mention the thing I did want to talk about, which is true of this episode and true of the next one, which is it tangibly feels like the animation is better. Like they got approved like on a budget increase or something. Especially in the next episode, I'll say. But like what you say, when there's so many times, I think a couple times at the very beginning of this episode, where like the animation, it's a fixed frame and the only thing that moves is a mouth. Later on, there are facial expressions happening and there's cape swishes and like body language expressing character and things. And in the next episode, it extends into the lighting and cinematography, and some of the scene transitions are like genuinely like very good filmmaking. And I was really impressed by it. So that's also why I felt like it was a repilot, because of this improved budget they were given, or whatever the reason for that increased animation quality.
Yeah, it'd be worth looking up actually. I don't know whether they've just like come back from a mid-season break for this episode, because we are about halfway through the season. So I do wonder whether this is the first after some, a short time off the air. But you're right that especially in the next episode, some of the lighting is like genuinely gorgeous. Like the scene at the beginning when they're talking to the disgraced admiral. I don't want to bleed into talking about the next episode without reading the intro, but
this is exactly the scene.
It just looks. The palette is like it's inspired, right? Like it looks like a different show. I think it's done by the same animation team to my knowledge, because they don't have the kind of soft lines of the DVD release, flashbacks or whatever, the El Fasel scene. But yeah, looks like a different show at times.
And it's so distinct to that scene in particular. Maybe we should move on to the next episode, but that scene in particular is so distinct because every other scene in the show, no matter what room they're in, is lit exactly the same way by fluorescent tubes directly above them, regardless of, like, I don't know, they should be silhouetted in some scenes, or like they're constantly against the stars, whether they're outside on a planet somewhere, it's like the exact same lighting.
Just hospital lighting,
yeah, exactly. And so the fact that they're candlelit, like it looks like Barry Lyndon, like Stanley Kubrick, and you can feel that it's candlelit. Like that scene is my favorite. So unless anyone has anything more to say on that first episode, maybe we should move to the next.
My final thing to say was that at the end, the narrator says that Julian takes his first step on Isilon or something. And there's a picture, like the last frame is like Yang Wenli and I can't remember who else is there, like Dusty Attenborough and a bunch of people. And Julian's just kind of like behind them in the background, and he's just holding Yang Wenli's cat, the basket. And I thought
in a
that was
basket,
nice. I'm glad that the cat is also there.
Yeah, I thought it was sweet. Also, because in the scene previously when Yang is like getting the Isilon gang together, Julian seems concerned that he might not be invited. And that I think that conversation clearly happens like off screen, but then the audience gets the reassurance that don't worry, Julian's still here, and in the most adorable way imaginable with a cat in a basket.
I think that also leads quite well into the next episode because we get a bit more Julian in that episode too.
Yep. All right. Tom, do you want to do the synopsis?
Yes. Episode 17, Before the Storm. Julian Mintz asks...
Yeah, it's this one. Oh, sorry.
I probably deserve that.
Yeah. This better not become a running joke.
This is a one-episode thing only. Julian Mintz asks Frederica Greenhill how Yang Wenli became the hero of El Fasel 9 years ago. The Free Planet Alliance fleet stationed around the frontier planet El Fasel, led by Arthur Lynch, fled the approaching Imperial fleet, leaving 3 million civilians behind. Yang, one of the few officers left, organized an evacuation while the escaping Alliance fleet was defeated and captured. Meanwhile, in the Empire, Reinhard von Lohengram thinks a civil war is about to break out. In order to avoid an intervention from the Alliance, he decides to plant Lynch into the Alliance to stage a military coup. The move is hidden behind an exchange of 2 million prisoners of war in January 797 UC.
I thought this episode was great. I really enjoyed it. It's so I remember from my first viewing this episode very clearly because it's the first time when a member of the Imperial, Lohengram's court meets with Yang for the first time. I think it's the first time we have any meeting between these two factions directly. So it's kind of a big moment for everyone.
I
don't know. Yeah.
I think it's cool that they just they meet each other, and it kind of comes a bit out of I didn't expect it before this episode started, let alone for it to be Yang and Kirkiais who face to face meet each other and shake hands. And I remember that happened the first time I watched it as well. I was taken a bit by surprise. It's a bit understated as far as the direction of the show kind of delivers it. It just happens in this episode, and it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, it did make me think of that writing advice where it's if you have a scene that you want to do it early, right? Don't faff around and build up for too long. You should just do the scene when it first makes sense. And definitely it feels like we have a breath from this huge battle that's happened from the last episode, in the last arc.
Yeah.
And so it's important for us as the audience to see this different side of all these characters, or to see them meet.
I guess this happens a little bit later in the episode. And we start off with this flashback with Julian and Federica kind of talking about Yang and his his kind of backstory a little bit, which I thought was actually, maybe, I don't know what you guys thought. I thought it was a little bit weak to have it as this sort of kind of flashback sort of thing that goes on for a while, and they're just kind of chatting over the top conversationally. I thought it was fine, just maybe a little bit weak, and I didn't really know why it was happening until the whatever it's called, Arthur Lynch character gets introduced, and you kind of realize that he's going to play a central role in this episode. And then I thought, oh, okay, it all kind of makes sense now why we're reliving El Fasel again. But yeah, that's kind of the beginning of this episode, I guess.
Yeah, this episode has 3 openings, right? It has 3 things that kind of open the plot. We have the discussion of Isilon as a fortress. Then we have this flashback scene. And then we have the candlelit scene with Lohengram and Lynch. And yeah, it almost feels like there's too much to get started at the beginning of the episode, which isn't necessarily a weakness of the episode. It's just that, we do have to rush through these things quite quickly. I thought the discussion between Federica and Julian was as good as it possibly could have been, but it is kind of retreading what we've already seen in a previous episode. We already discussed how much the flashback felt tacked on. Also, as I've discovered, I think I sent you a thing on WhatsApp just before we started recording. The DVD redraws of the show, there's a few people have managed to dig up the original Laserdisc versions, and the animation for El Fasel is much funnier and much more characterful. So even that feels disappointing with regards to the flashbacks. I also thought it was weird that Julian and Federica are talking about Yang, and then they're oh, if he hadn't become the person he is today, he'd probably be an alcoholic in a ditch somewhere. And you're
they're just
Jesus
chuckling.
Christ. Yeah, they're just laughing about it, that Yang. He does drink too much.
Okay, that's funny.
Yeah.
My subtitles didn't say that.
I don't think it explicitly said alcoholic, but in my subs it said he'd be in a ditch somewhere.
It did say something about
it didn't
ditch.
Say that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mine just said he'd be a happier guy.
Maybe it says
to translate the original Japanese.
Yeah. I guess it also establishes a connection between these two characters for the first time, which we haven't really. I don't know if they've really spent a lot of time around each other, Julian and Federica. So their conversation is a little bit awkward, but that kind of makes sense why it would be, I guess.
Yeah, because they're in the same fan club, but they don't have a lot in common.
Right? Yeah.
I will say that this flashback, felt necessary for the following scene, as you said.
Mm.
It also contributed a big part as to why I felt like these two felt like a repilot. Like, in case you missed it, this is what previously happened. Because this guy's going to be important, and you have no idea who he is. I certainly forgot who he was until he showed up again. Yeah.
I think Lynch might have only barely been mentioned in a previous episode. I don't even know that he was named in the previous flashback.
Are you saying he got retconned? Is he like Poochie from?
I have to go. My planet needs me.
And he did go, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And Arthur Lynch's planet did need him, I guess, and he failed.
Yeah, he did the opposite of Poochie.
He did the opposite
his
of
planet.
Poochie. Yeah, he abandoned it. Yeah. And now he's gone back to, I don't know, ruin it again or save it in a different way.
No.
Yeah, I don't think he's retconned. I just think he wasn't mentioned before, really. Well, you could see that as a retcon.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Yeah, they did say that the leadership was incompetent in a previous episode. Like they said, the only person who stepped up was Yang, and he did it reluctantly and all this kind of stuff. So clearly this person did exist. But yeah, I think this is the first time that he's been named.
Yeah, it's a great transition from the flashback to describing of the events of it to him describing the events of it, and the total how he feels disrespected, and how he hates Yang Wenli, and his motivation becomes so clear as to why he's perfect for this role that Lowengram wants to put him in.
Yeah, we've already kind of gushed about how good this scene looks, but I also think the scene is a lot of fun. It's so melodramatic, and so there's a lot of egos in the room. Mm-hmm. My favorite moment is when he's like, oh, what am I supposed to do? It's either am I supposed to just die? Oh, my life will be so miserable, this kind of stuff. And then and Lowengram just looks at him and he's like, then die. And it
unravels his brain.
Yeah, he just completely melts. Yeah. And it reminded me of the then perish Obama meme, which was knocking around, which I'll send you. But I think the whole scene's really effective. I think it's really good. It's kind of a change of tactic for Lowengram, I guess, to be this underhanded or to use this kind of subterfuge. But it fits now that Oberstein is in the picture. These are the sort of this is the toolkit that he has available to him. So,
yeah, it felt very in line with his character.
Yeah, it feels in line with his character, but he just hadn't had the capacity to do it, right? I think Oberstein even opens the scene. He's sitting in the room with Lynch before Lowengram comes in.
That's right. Yeah, I think this section of the plot is quite cool. The way that it just feels quite clever. I don't know if another show would kind of do this, to have the confidence to be like, the Kaiser's dead in the Empire. What does that mean? Obviously means it's going to be a civil war, because I'm just going to intentionally only have children available to fill the role as Kaiser or Kaiserine. And so if there's a civil war, Lowengram needs to do something about it. So he comes up with this plot to destabilize the other empire, the alliance. And then Yang Wenli sees through it immediately, and then he is still going to allow it to happen and try and work out his own plan to counteract it. And I just feel like it was all very it's a new way for these two big nations to interact and try and have power over each other without having another space battle. And yeah, it gives you the chance for like lots of new storytelling avenues and characters and things that I just thought was very competent writing, I guess.
I think it achieves like a lot with very few actual plot threads, right? We get introduced to the Earth cult, to some of Yang's backstory, to a new villain, to a new conflict between Kircheis and Oberstein, to like an internal political struggle within the Empire. All of this stuff stems from basically the same single plot point, which is the Kaiser is dead. Everything seems like it falls naturally out of that one incident. It never felt forced. So yeah, I agree.
It feels like the introduction of spycraft into the show, like if with the discussion of like prisoner exchanges and things.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the history of like massive prisoner exchanges and things, but when I think of them from my reading of books or watching TV shows, I always think of them as involving spies, and they happen in secret. So the idea of like massive prisoner exchanges happening in front of the public with press conferences and things, and then having a secret plan behind the prisoner exchange feels like a different aspect to the war. That's very cool to see, because it's usually just been, you know, um, bureaucracy and giant battles in space, and there's a whole like intelligence part to this that we've seen less of, I think, compared to now. That's cool to see.
Yeah, it feels a bit more Cold War than World War One, World War Two, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Like we're watching groups of Soviet sympathizers being sent off to Moscow. It's very I think it's a good plot. I think the way the Earth cult, because the Earth cult obviously is going to be a major part of the show going forwards. I was quite surprised that it was introduced so casually, and also quite effectively. Besides the Space Pope Palpatine reveal, which is hokey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. This episode also introduces like the scale of Issalon Fortress, like the enormity of its like self-sustaining life support systems and everything, and the size of the civilian population. It's like if you lived at like Disney World, like the fact that Disney World is its own city as well as like this massive, corporate operation, and that Yang Wenli's the head of the whole thing. He's Walt. He's the frozen head that's running the whole. It's like, what did they say? 5 million people.
Something
so
like
he's
that.
Like,
5 million. Yeah.
So he's like running not only the military's like most massive. He's running the Death Star and like the city of Barcelona at the same time.
Yeah. And presumably, I mean, the show doesn't go into too many details in this episode, but most of the civilians on Issalon are, at this time, Imperial citizens, right? Like, there's non-combatants who are from the opposing side, and I guess this is part of the prisoner exchange that we see. That these millions of people aboard Issalon are being exchanged for the prisoners of war on the other side. But yeah, he's at the top of his game. He's got it all.
It does give him a lot of authority. And we already talked about the reshuffle of the military and stuff, which and some of that comes under Yang's own initiative, where he sort of rescues Calzern from Calzern. He decides to take the fall for some of the like offensive going wrong, I think, because he was in charge of that part of the logistics, and it wasn't really his fault, but at the same time he knew he was going to have to take the fall for it. And then Yang gets elevated. He's like, oh right, okay, well maybe I can just promote him instead, or like give him this new role. And they have a little bit of bureaucracy to sort out in the background before they can smooth things over. But it does end up with Calzern being given this higher position as well, which is, I think, maybe the first time Yang kind of is able to do that on his own
freely.
With his own kind of agenda.
Oh, I just had a question about that scene, which was, in that scene, his previous commanding officer, I forget his name, he's like, I'm off. I'm chilling. See ya.
Mhm.
He mentions that Bucock will be the new head of the military, and that he's going. I thought he said he's going to make Yang Wenli his chief of staff, as in the second
Mm.
highest position. But then he says, I'm gonna be heading Isolon Fortress. So is he doing both roles, or is he that chief of staff thing
I
was
don't think
nothing?
he's chief of staff yet, right? Like I think in my subs, I think it said he intends to make him your chief of staff, not that
No.
he can yet. Which is also something that he said in a previous episode, right? That like we want you at the top. But Yang is still quite young, right? And the Republic works on different rules compared to the Empire. So you can't just have a random, boy king rising through the ranks.
Right. You have to be 35 years old to run for president.
Yeah, this kind of thing. Or, increasingly 65. So.
Sure.
Yeah, I wasn't sure actually. I maybe I was not really paying enough attention. I assumed the roles were kind of being head of Islon Fortress was part of being the chief of staff, but maybe I misread that.
I could be wrong. Yeah, I could be wrong.
But yeah, Bucock, yeah, Alexander, badass Bucock.
He's already a badass already at this point.
Yeah, he's already like kind of. I remember later in the show watching it and then looking back and trying to remember when he first sort of appeared or where I first took notice of him. But he does get a bit more sort of screen time, or he's made a bit more memorable than I remembered early on. And they have that like chat in the park after dark, which also feels quite Cold War.
Eating like cool. Karage on the park bench, yeah.
Yeah, it sends Julian off for a walk.
Yeah. That park reminded me of the Serpentine at Hyde Park. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but like the lake with the like sculpture in the middle. Yeah, maybe think of the Serpentine.
The kind of snake-like nature of the Serpentine, and you have this snake in the prisoner of war exchange. Is probably all intentional.
Yeah. The drip in this episode is extremely good, especially from Bucock and Yang. I thought it's very like 80s business casual. Like Bucock's like costumes are great. They do feel like Cold War costumes, right? Like he's in the like parka and the like the tie. He feels like a tired member of MI6, like meeting with some informant. On a park bench.
I definitely agree about the latter part. The first part, I don't know if it's great. I definitely did think I could see Joel wearing all of this, but maybe that's not the same thing.
That's fair.
But you're totally right. It did feel very Cold War, like MI6. That very much. That's the vibe. Very cool.
I was actually watching it and like looking at Yang Wenli's outfit and like, oh man, I used to have an outfit like that. Like when I was at university, a green cashmere, yellow shirt, brown jacket. That was me.
There's no wonder you looked at it and said, "God, that's a good look."
Yeah, it's a good look. Yeah. Cold War chic.
Did you also tried to get recruited by MI5?
No, but I did get aggressively leafleted by Rolls-Royce at a careers fair once. So that's almost the same.
Well, they work in the same field, so.
Yeah. I mean, it's, yeah. It's all imperialism.
Is the scene after this, so after the park, MI5 meeting, they see the Terra cult march,
yeah.
and then Terra freedom fighters, sorry, and is that what then leads to the like secret Terra like meeting that happens in the room with all the faces shrouded?
Yeah.
I thought that scene was cool. I was sure they were going to reveal that one of the faces belongs to a character we already know.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
and reveal them to be part of this group, because, like, the idea that powerful people in legitimate government or military aren't also believers in an extreme right-wing ideology, because the admiral also describes them as a right-wing group, like, is
Yeah.
Mhm.
fully based in reality. And then they reveal that Lynch is part of that group in that meeting there as well.
Mm.
So then that also implies to me that this terror movement as a whole is, like, at least in part funded by the Imperials, because that's very, like, the opening of Rambo, where they, like, thank the brave what are they called, the Mujahideen
Mujahideen
fighters,
fighters.
yeah,
Yeah.
which were just funded by the US and then became Al
Yeah.
Qaeda. Like,
Mhm.
that felt very much in
Yeah.
line with the sort of thing they're talking about here.
Well, I think when they like pan around the room and they're doing like kind of close ups of some of these members who are talking in this room. Like I was also almost expecting one of them to be like, I know that face, someone we'd already seen. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It did feel like that was about to happen, and I wonder whether they just didn't have the right person that they wanted to do it with, or something, or whether that was part of the plan. And I kind of
Yeah,
wonder
maybe too early.
Yeah, if we'd been introduced to a like memorable character who was part of the PKC, that former like kind of SS squadron that we met earlier in the show, whether that would have it would have been that person, because I think maybe it's Bucock who says that maybe the PKC is, it kind of fell apart. Maybe this is just what it's become now. They've just kind of melted into this new faction, but it's kind of, similar principles in a way. And I think that would have been quite cool to have seen that delivered as through a character who had moved from one group to another. But I guess they didn't really have that character to do it with. So it's kind of, just a throw.
Would have been a real shock if Bucock had been in the room.
I actually thought it was going to be the I forget his name, Yang Wenli's like previous commanding officer, who like tells him, "Bye, you're going to be named chief of staff." I thought he was going to be revealed to be part of that group.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I've been ousted, and now I'm a real terror
enthusiast
person.
I'm a true believer. Yeah.
True believer.
I just I just wanted to like get it right. So at the very end of Rambo 3, the Sylvester Stallone film, it says this film is dedicated to the brave Mujahideen fighters of Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, say what you want about them, they definitely are brave. So
you got to hand it to them.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you do got to hand it to the Taliban.
I'm glad you got that.
Cut that. Yeah, cut that.
Oh, there's one in every episode. On a lighter note, we see quite a lot of Julian in this episode, which I thought was and like Yang and Julian talking together. They're playing chess together, and then Yang gives him a little bit of like philosophy. Can't quite remember what he says. Tells him not to be a certain way or something.
Is this when they're playing 3D chess?
Yeah, they're playing 3D chess at one point, and I think Yang is losing. I think he's always losing at chess in the show.
Is that a real?
It's like a running joke. Yeah. 3D chess.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a real game. I don't think anyone really plays it though.
After the 3D chess, I remember two things. So I'll just wrap just before this is they exit out of the secret meeting scene by zooming into Lynch's bottle of alcohol, and then like
Mm.
closer and closer, like it's like like an ocean of blood or something.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
does a match cut to, I don't know, another body of water. I forget. So maybe it's not that good of a match cut if I don't remember where it's match cutting to. But then after the 3D chess scene, they run out of there. Like he says, I've got to go back to Heineken, or I forget exactly.
Mm.
Then he's on a like pedestrian street where the whole street is a travelator. Like the whole entire floor just is going in a direction.
Pretty cool.
Which I thought was
Bright yellow travelator. Yeah.
For safety, so you know.
Yeah. So you can see it.
But that's cool. They should really do that in real life.
Do you remember? This is a deep pull. Do you remember? Like this whole thing like gadget bonds. No, it's like about gadget bonds. Like every time the government wants to build a new train, like trains are really expensive. So all of these like tech bro types will like come and be like, "We can do a train, but cheaper. All you need to do is buy into this unproven technology. Look, it's like 100 times cheaper." This is basically what happened with like Hyperloop or whatever. Sorry if there's any Elon Musk fans in the audience, but you've been duped. Yeah, like gadget bonds are like there's a whole cottage industry around them. And when London was first talking about doing the Elizabeth line or finishing the Elizabeth line, there was always a question about whether or not it was going to get done. A company did this huge press release about building gigantic travelators underneath London. Do you remember this? This was like people would not stop talking about it for like a week. They were doing that, taking like the old tube tunnels from like the Necropolis Railway or the Postal Railway, which are too small to fit like modern trains down, and they were like, "We'll just put a giant travelator under the city, so you just walk onto it." So stupid.
Yeah, I can't believe
anyway, I guess it's been tried. Well, it hasn't been tried because it's but.
Is it so stupid, or if it worked, it would be sick?
Do you think they were inspired?
I mean, it works at the airport. Yeah,
from episode 17 of. I mean,
if they're such big fans, where's their podcast?
That's
my question.
If only we hadn't had that storm, we would have had that travelator under the city of London.
That's
the English weather for you.
Like the Parkway or like the High Line in New York, which were former like underground lines, and they've now just made them like sort of public park paths.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
very successful. People like them. How is this not the exact same thing, except you go faster because there's travelators on the ground?
I mean, when you put it like that, it seems very sensible. Yeah.
I'm sorry that this is like the thing that is most like gotten to me in this episode was the travelator, but for so much of the show is like so retro futuristic. This is the first thing that felt well, besides the self-driving car that they also drive in. I'm talking about. There's a scene where Julian and him are in a car.
Yeah.
And it pans over, and there's no one on the steering wheel. They're just sat in the back, which I thought was a funny way to depict that.
Yeah, I mean nowadays that's just normal, So
maybe the travelators are too far away.
Maybe they're on the horizon. Yeah.
Just a minor, like another minor divergence. Did you hear the news?
This is just collapsing into chaos. Yeah.
Sorry. Did you hear the news that the Elizabeth line, which I guess officially just launched last year, is now going to have like upgrades or like works to fix it until 2029?
Sorry, what? So they're just going to close it?
No, I think it's going to run, but like it's been running like shit the last week, with like stations fully packed and like signal failures, and I guess they don't fully know what's wrong, so they're estimating that works will be required at least in part until 2029.
That rules.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I'm not in London, so I don't care.
2029 is quite a long way away. You might end up back there.
That's true.
I definitely did not work on HS2 or like the Elizabeth line at all. I had
No,
nothing
I
to
mean,
do with that.
you would
I
have.
don't
You
know what
would.
the CV says. I didn't work
Well,
on those
you'd
projects.
worked on it. You would have built the travelator. So, I mean, obviously, you didn't work on it.
Yeah, exactly. If you were involved, you would have pushed harder for those travelators.
I did. They kept kicking me out of the meetings where I'd propose it. Sorry, Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Yeah, welcome back to our Crossrail podcast, where we talk about Crossrail for an hour and a half every week.
We know about as much about Crossrail as we do as the lore of Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
It's true. Also, I can't believe I called it the Elizabeth line. I feel dirty.
I've already forgotten who she is, to be honest. You know, I've moved on, haven't we all?
What else would you call it? What was the other name for it?
It's just not. It's not a tube line, right? Like, it's just pedantic, but it's not a tube line. So yeah, it's a confusing branding. It's like the Overground is not called, like, doesn't have the tube branding because it's not considered part of the London Underground, and the Elizabeth line also not part of the London Underground, but they use the tube branding. We've gone so off topic.
We've gone off topic again. We nearly pulled it back.
Yeah,
and then somebody made some kind of stupid joke.
The Overground does have the same branding. What are you talking about?
But it's not like the Overground line. They have their own like orange roundel. Yeah, they're not allowed to use the. I guess the Elizabeth line has the purple roundel, but you know.
But the Overground also has that. It has the circle with the name through it.
Let's get back on topic. Now that I've been proven wrong.
So the prisoner of war exchange happens. We can go back to this bit because we didn't talk about it that much, and now it's in the right maybe point of the show. And Yang and Kirky Ice meet each other, and then they basically like, this guy's great. I wish we could be best friends. Not best friends, maybe second best friends. I've already got a best friend, but
everyone is absolutely swooning over this guy.
Yeah,
like. And no one will stop talking about how handsome he is.
Yeah.
Like, people Poplin's like falling over backwards. Like, it's intense.
Like, good
everyone,
good hair, good eyes. Doesn't look like a psychopath. Yeah. The animators are doing their job now.
No, hold on. No, wait a minute. He definitely still looks like a psychopath and acts like one. And I think this is deliberate. Like, everyone's major attraction to him, because isn't there a big thing about like people falling in love with like the Unabomber, like Ted Kaczynski and like Charles Manson, where they'd have like prison wives and stuff, or like they'd get lots of love letters. How is this not the exact same thing?
This is such a wild and rogue theory. I think we should like maybe frame the rest of all of our podcasts through this lens, that Kirky Ice is just a psychopath. I don't think anybody else has done this telling of Legend.
This is a brand new reading of the show.
It's a brand new reading, and like once you see it, you can't unsee it.
It's a reading of what I'm reading what's there on the page. Okay,
I say what I see.
So plain to me. It's like when they say terrorist, you know, like there's no way to unsee the connection they're making, and I'm making the exact same connection here.
I've just never read psychopathy into his face. He just seems like a very composed man, you know?
Yeah, I shouldn't say psychopath. It's like sociopathy, isn't it? That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah. Well, then, fair enough. I'm completely in agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, we get the meeting between... Okay, yeah, first of all, everyone is swooning. To differing degrees. I like that Shenkop makes it about himself. Just comes in and he's like, yeah, and if he continues to look this good for the next 10 years, maybe he'll look better than I do.
I'm hot too.
Yeah. Nobody forget, I'm still here.
I'm still here.
You also forget like how much older Shenkop is than like all of the other characters, because like most of the cast is pretty young. I think he's supposed to be like in his late 30s.
Yeah, they definitely.
To...
Then they have it. I think it's like an episode about this at some point. Someone turns 30, and it's like the whole episode. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
I can't remember if it's a filler episode or whether other stuff happens. But
I think Dusty turns 30. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
He's not already 30.
No.
Crazy. I can't believe I'm older than Dusty Attenborough.
Well, he was 30 in 1989, so yeah, he's probably a bit older now.
I guess if you're going to go by that Homer Simpson's 37 logic forever, right?
Yeah. Isn't Homer Simpson supposed to be 33?
Like
that?
I can't deal with that.
Like that blows my mind, because when I was a child, I remember watching the show and being like, 33 is like, what's the difference between 33 and like 60? You know, like it's just all grown ups. And now I'm 31, and I'm like, Homer is 33. That can't be right.
Yeah, I know people older than that. You know,
I know people who are older than this.
Yeah.
He's got 3 kids, owns a house, 2 cars, and is a nuclear engineer.
Yeah. I haven't even managed to have 1 kid
that you know about. So the prisoner conference.
Thanks for that injection of anxiety. I'm very thinking about that for the rest of the evening.
The prisoner swap press conference that takes place. Again, I don't know much about this. Is there like a history of like big press conferences between opposing military forces where they have a huge prisoner swap like this?
There were some very famous prisoner swaps during the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, particularly of like very high-ranking scientists in the US. Who there are a lot of communists in science, as you probably imagine.
Yeah, I watched Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I mean him, famously. Although actually, that's completely untrue. He's cut his ties with the Communist Party. Anything you've heard is slander and libel. So, but in terms of these big press conferences, I'm not completely sure. I have to look into it. But yeah, I think these things tend to be a little less public when they happen. But maybe in the early Cold War, people are a bit more naive about this.
Yeah, it's interesting because the sort of theater of it with the press and the signing of documents, and Kierkegaard even makes the point about this formality is all silly. Sort of like makes the point about the theater of the entire warfare, like that they conduct between themselves. Like it was a 30 million man operation, and 20 million of them died on the FBA side. That seemingly has had no effect on policy besides shuffling a few jobs around. There's no focus on any of those people who died. It's all just numbers that get shuffled around in like an Excel document, and they talk about it with like massive, like they're smiling and joking like during this press conference, and it just seems so like it should not be made light of in the way that they do, is how it feels.
Yeah, I guess it's for the sake of the prisoners is the only way I can interpret it. Like, it's for the sake of the staff, obviously, who, especially on the Imperial side, it kind of is all a game, right? Like, I don't think we don't really see the Imperial admirals struggle with their death tolls, like on their own side, in the way that we do with the FPA. Yang is constantly upset about kind of casualties or all these sorts of things. So on the Imperial side, they already see it as theatre. And then I think who it's for is, the prisoners who are being exchanged, right? To see this amicable kind of, that we haven't forgotten you and this kind of stuff. You even get the big address by Lowengram where he says like, we'll forgive any kind of deserters. Everyone's going to be promoted. We'll give you some time off, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then Yang does like a slow
that reaction.
It was so good. Yeah. Like,
flawless. is what it said in my
And like
subtitles.
nobody else clapped. Nobody else clapped. So it's just like the giant kind of command center of Isilon. It's just him like just clapping. It's so good.
There's been a repeated refrain of Yang Wenli and Lowengram's like mutual respect for each other increasing as episode by episode goes. Like game respects game. Like do they both say, "I really want to meet this guy" to the other one?
They do. They don't say it to. They both say it in this episode. They don't say it, to each other. But
no.
Yeah, Yang says.
Yeah, they do both.
He really wants to meet Logram, and very wistfully, like I'd love to meet him. And Kirky goes back and has a conversation with Logram, and they talk about something that happened. And Logram kind of pauses and he's like side eyes him, and is like, "What is he like?" Kirky's like,
"Is he tall? I bet he's like, tall."
I don't really know. And Logram's like, "Oh, but if I had to guess, he seems like the best person in the whole world." Logram is like, yeah, I really want to meet him too.
Just two men pining after each other from either side of the galaxy.
Does Kirky say in that scene, like, what if we became friends with him? Like,
it's like, this relationship has room for a third. Why don't we?
I mean, I'm open if you're open, but if you're not open, then I was never open to it. But if you,
I think. God damn it. I think he says he's like, in another time we could have been friends, or like something like this. Like, I just wish we could be friends. Like that you'd have a lot in common with this person. I think it's consistent, right? Like all the way across the episode so far, we have like a growing kind of respect for the two of them. Apart from in the last episode where we do see Lowengram finally snap, right? Like, because in the previous episodes before now, there's been nothing but admiration for Yang and his constant successes, and it might have frustrated him or whatever, but he sees it as like the incompetence of the other admirals, right? When Isilon gets taken, he's like, it's the incompetence of those admirals. That's why Yang won. Maybe he's a military genius, but don't worry, when I take him on, it's all going to be fine. And then when Yang exploits the weaknesses in his team, he blames Bittenfeld, right? Like he says, how long will I have to suffer for the failures of one man? And eventually you see the real, the acceptance in the conversation with Kirky Ice. The Yang is actually as good as everyone says, and it pisses him off, right? Like he has his strop. And finally in this episode, an episode later, he's come to a kind of acceptance that he respects Yang more deeply than he did originally, and more deeply than he did before.
Yeah.
I think the only comparison I can understand for like their rivalry is sports rivalries, where they can and do, like two great rivals they can and do love each other off the court, and then on the court they absolutely like want to destroy the other one, and that both are true simultaneously, and they want to do that because they know how good they are, and they think they are and can be better than them. That's how it feels to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think we talked briefly. There's a Saladin and
that's literally who I was going to talk about.
Is it
Richard the Lionheart and Saladin? Yeah. I can't remember whether we talked about this in a previous episode, so I apologize to the audience if we already did. Yeah. But Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, at least in terms of like the accounts we have, had this kind of like mutual respect for one another. Because anyone who's a real historian who's listening to this, I'm really butchering the story. But Richard the Lionheart came in to Jerusalem, the Holy Land, where everything was going horribly wrong for Crusaders, and was basically like, I'm going to change the rules of the game. Everyone's being too nice, and starts like committing atrocities and all this kind of stuff. And Saladin basically matches him 1 for 1 for every atrocity that he commits. Saladin commits another one, and sends him letters basically saying, if you continue doing this, this is just going to keep going. Right? If you stop, I'll stop, but I'm not going to stop if you don't stop. And Richard the Lionheart stops. Like he kind of agrees, and they come to this strange like respect for one another despite the fact that they are on the battlefield killing one another and taking land back and forth. And Richard the Lionheart's horse was killed in a battle, and he wrote to Saladin because they like exchanged letters. Saying, my horse was killed in the last battle. And Saladin's like, I'll send you 3 of my finest horses and you can choose one. Like this kind of thing. It's like this, again, yeah, you're like on the battlefield, like the gloves are off. But outside of that context, there's this strange, like almost romantic, like appreciation for one another between the 2 characters. Yeah, it really, really, it reminds me of that. Because of all of those letters that we have some surviving copies of, Saladin still has a reputation. There's like a statue of him in Paris and stuff. Still has a reputation as like a perfect knight. It's very, really interesting. So, yeah.
That's really cool. That it seems to mirror Yang Wenli and Lowengram, pretty decent amount. Remind me how the relationship between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin ended?
How did it end? I can't
Didn't
remember.
one kill the other, I thought.
Oh, possibly.
I thought
My God.
Saladin killed him.
Are you not thinking of Renaud de Chatillon? I think Richard the Lionheart was actually killed by a crossbowman. I think this is true. I think he was killed by one of his own crossbowmen when he was back in France, because he was King of England and France. He had holdings in France. I think he was accidentally shot by a crossbowman.
Okay.
But Renaud de Chatillon was killed by Saladin after a very long back and forth struggle, but that predates the arrival of Richard the Lionheart.
Okay.
That's the one where Saladin invites him into the house and he gives water to Renaud de Chatillon's friend, and then de Chatillon takes the water without permission, and Saladin kills him and says that he's like broken the rules of engagement. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
Pretty cold, yeah. But de Chatillon was like the worst of all the Crusaders. They're all pretty bad, but he was the worst one.
You know the Ridley Scott movie, Kingdom of Heaven?
Yeah.
I mean, Saladin is in. I know.
Yeah.
I saw this movie so long ago. Does the film cover some of this, or I don't remember?
Yeah, it covers up to the siege of Jerusalem. Balin, we're going so off topic, but Balin, the main character in Kingdom of Heaven, was a real guy. But he's completely fabricated. His character is completely fabricated in the movie. He was a real guy, but he was a real bastard. In the film, they make him to be kind of sympathetic, which is weird. But yes, they cover up to the fall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. So that's before Richard the Lionheart arrives on the scene.
Okay. That's a great movie. I really want to rewatch that.
It's pretty good. I think it's so close to being good. It's
Is
like
it the director's cut you watched?
Yeah, I watched the director's cut. I loved everything except for Balin's characterization, like Orlando Bloom's character.
Right.
Did not like that. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, we've gone way off topic.
The person who plays Saladin is really good.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. But yeah, good performance.
Okay, that's the end of our regular segment, Crusades and Movie Minute.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about the Snyder Cut, or do we just talk about director's cuts like every episode now?
We're such podcasters. I hate it. Yeah.
I don't listen to many other podcasts anymore, but I was listening to a podcast episode a few days ago, and the Snyder Cut was mentioned in that podcast episode. I thought, the Zack Snyder,
okay,
director's cut.
Sorry, I thought you said the Schneider Cut, which sounds like very different to me.
Maybe I did say that. It's just this microphone. Anyway, I thought, we're such professionals. We know all of the tropes that you've got to squeeze into a podcast episode. So I was pleased about that.
Yeah, I've read the scriptures.
once or twice.
I've watched the Snyder Cut.
Yeah. Have you watched the Schneider Cut?
No, that one.
Wouldn't recommend that one.
That one's been lost to time.
Yeah. We'll talk about
Did
that
you
one
actually
next
watch
week.
it?
No, I haven't watched it. We already agreed. I'll do it on Patreon. If we get £15 a month on Patreon, then I'll watch the Snyder Cut.
This is where we plug the Patreon. Well, that was so smooth the way you just led into the Patreon ad break.
Yeah.
Patreon.com/Skies of Love.
Yeah. If you want to listen to us talk about off-topic stuff for 20 minutes in the middle of a podcast episode. Shall we get back on track?
I think I think if we ever do it in the Snyder Cut podcast episode, we should definitely go on off tangent and start talking about Legend of the Galactic Heroes. I think that would be good.
Oh yeah, obviously.
People really enjoy that.
Yeah. This really reminds me of episode 63 of Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Like, oh god, they did this in reverse. Just the same content.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, we're back.
Chat with my own. Oh no, yeah, I think I'm using the correct microphone. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, yada yada yada. Islam Fortress, weird music choice. That's that was before we lost the signal.
Sweeping classical score. You said something. Minor key.
In minor key.
Anxiety was building.
Inducing.
The hydroponics were all failing.
They're all going to break. Yeah, that's how it felt.
In the end, it all worked out.
It was fine.
Nothing went wrong.
Yeah.
Nothing failed. Nobody's uploads stalled at 99%. Nothing happened.
Do you know what? I noticed the exact same thing with the music. I thought it was a really inspired choice. It was really I don't know. This is sort of what I was talking about with like the really good filmmaking choices they're making in these last two episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like the music working really well with the scenes that they're showing. It's way better than the Skies of Love theme song. That music. And it reminded me of there's a. I'll try not to be too spoilery about this in case we ever do it, but there's an episode of The Leftovers, where there's a repeated refrain they use from. I don't know what the name of the musical is. Verdi's.
Verdi's Requiem. Oh.
Nabucco, I think, which is about. Is it the like, when what is when the Prince of Egypt, when the Jews leave? Is that what that is?
Like in the Prince of the Exodus, yeah.
The Exodus, yes. So the musical is about, the opera is about that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so the song that they've picked is a refrain from that, and the first time you hear it in the episode is like it comes out of nowhere, and it's really like quite shocking, which is a similar feeling to how I felt when the operatic music started playing in this. Keep reusing it throughout the episode, and it gets in your head. Like it's really really good song.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this I don't think that Legend of the Galactic Heroes has like strong leitmotif, but it does kind of toy with it, right? Like there's certain songs that are associated with the Empire and certain ones that are associated with the FBA. I did notice that when Kirky Ice arrives, I don't know if it does it for different characters, though. I'd have to keep a listen.
Maybe later in the show. I have a feeling that we talked about this.
It does.
You and I talked about this before when we watched it the first time.
Yeah.
But maybe not till quite a bit later you really notice.
I don't think we can talk about it until the fourth season, but this show does begin to toy with leitmotif quite aggressively, actually, now that I remember. Yeah.
What, in a quite John Williams kind of way?
I think so. Yeah. Like I don't think it's because they're just using like public domain classical pieces for the most part in the show. It doesn't have that kind of intentionality that John Williams does, but I think it works. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about it in the fourth season. When you said the Prince of Egypt when they leave Egypt, for some reason, I mean, it's late here, it's like 10 past midnight, I heard the Prince of Persia when they leave Egypt, and my brain went through like a journey trying to remember when that happened, when the Jews left Egypt in the Prince of Persia. I don't think it happens in that.
No, I don't think that happens in the Prince of Persia.
You mean like the PS2 game, Prince of Persia?
Yeah, the PS2, the Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time.
Where when you die accidentally or whatever, you hear the prince say,
Yeah.
no, it did not happen that way.
Yeah, a joke that Tom uses quite often in real life.
So
I like it in the Prince of Persia when the Jews leave. They leave Egypt, and then the prince says, "No, that's not how it happened," and then he redoes the whole thing.
I like it in the Prince of Egypt when Moses has to kill his father, who's turned into a sand zombie.
Oh, Joel! I mean, some people might not have played. God, you just ruined it for everyone.
All right, I think we've more or less wrapped up the episode. Should we do ratings and
I think I know what the ratings are going to
be. I'm gonna give these a 9.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I really like these episodes. There's a lot of they introduce a little bit of lore and world building, a little bit of mystery, and these are the things I love. It's like if J.J. Abrams made these ones, so nice.
Okay, I do feel like we're on the up and up with regards to your kind of reception of the show, though.
Yeah, I thought
when you started,
rating system was just going to be 7 every single one, low 7, high 7, but all 7s.
A 9 is a high 7.
When you get down to it, yeah.
7 is like a kind of a British 9.
Do you feel like your appreciation for the show is growing? Are you excited to see where it goes, or?
Yes. I sometimes I think about how, like, as you watch a TV show and you grow to love it more and more. Sometimes I feel like, is it improving, or am I having Stockholm syndrome or like sunk cost fallacy? Like, this is a thing, something I think about like pretty often when I watch it. Have I just sunk enough hours that I have to like it? Like, otherwise, what was the point?
Right.
But I actually do think that these two in particular, and the battle episode previously, are just leagues better than how the show began.
Yeah. I think it's interesting you call it Stockholm syndrome. I feel like sometimes when you're watching a show that is a bit rough around the edges, we talked about Twin Peaks before, and although I enjoyed the show, it took me a while to really appreciate it for what it was. I think it's like, for me, it feels like a momentum thing, right? Like, you come into a show with certain expectations of what it's going to be like, and when the show is not that, you kind of need to course correct, and like the process of course correction is your brain doesn't like it, right? Like it resists that process. So yeah, I definitely think that this happens.
Yeah, I mean, pilot episodes, like the beginnings, are famously very difficult to do well. Like, most pilots are not great. They'll have maybe a moment that like pulls you to keep you watching, or a couple, but it's really difficult to make a great first episode.
Great. I'm glad you're enjoying the show more. I do agree. I think the show is getting better, because my most recent memory of it was finishing season 4, and the end of season 4 is obviously fantastic. I don't think I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying that the quality doesn't like it doesn't do a Battlestar Galactica and suddenly fall off at the end. It does stick the landing. So that was my most recent memory of the show, was like the fantastic ending. So going back to the first episodes, some of them are a little rough. Some of them are a little like janky, or they haven't quite got their scripts down to like a sensible size or a sensible flow. But it does feel like the show is improving.
You know what was a really good pilot episode?
Mm-hmm.
The In the Skies of Love podcast pilot episode. I thought that was really good. The one about Galaxy Express 39, where somebody hadn't watched the entire movie. And
oh, right. You're talking about the unreleased pilot of this podcast. Yeah.
It's a shame, lost to time, but like many great works of art, I suppose.
Completely unrelatedly, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/ In the Skies of Love podcast. In the Skies of Love.
.patreon.com.
I don't know.
Yeah, just Google
I think it's for Skies of Love.
Yeah. All right. Should we close off?
Yeah. I've got no predictions. I think we set up a new status quo.
Yeah, everything's on the table.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure how things will move forward.
How are you feeling about the terrorists?
Is it gonna success or failure?
Sorry, what is a success or failure?
The coup d'etat.
Oh, failure. I think
bold prediction.
Yeah, Lynch ain't got it in him. He's not. He ain't got that game. So
ever since Mulholland Drive.
Jesus Christ. Okay, read the outro.
Who's gonna read it?
Tom, you read it because I closed the page.
Okay. I don't think I've ever read the outro before. I'm gonna do this in one take. Hang on. Thanks for listening to this episode of In the Skies of Love. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Legend of the Galactic Heroes. If you have any comments or questions, please reach out to us at intheskiesoflove@gmail.com. You can find Kamel on the internet at HiKamel on Twitter. And please tune in next time for our review of episodes. It's probably 18 and 19. Until then, we'll see you in the skies of love.
Great. Nice job, everyone.
We should put the thing about the Patreon in the outro.
Yeah, we should. I say that every time, I think. And I never do it. I'm not sure whether this one's going to be funnier because we kind of just fell apart about halfway through, or whether it's going to be less funny. But,
I think you always dislike the tangents a little bit more, and I always like them a little bit more. So, I'm sure there will be people who dislike it. I'm sure there will be people who like it. It's quite divisive. It's the Snyder cut of Skies of Love community.
I think probably some of them are good and some of them are bad. And
yeah, I intend to build my next tangents into the same narrative structure as the film Excalibur. It's kind of going to be a retelling of from start to finish of the film Excalibur. That will be the next tangent. Yeah.
We'll probably have to pause, not pause as such, but midway through we'll just show the whole movie.
Yeah. Or I'll just read the script with the voices. That would be good
if you could do all the voices.
Yeah.
I think you would do a good job at that. I think, like to be honest, I think, Joel, you've left on the table a second career as a voice actor.
Oh, yeah, that's very kind. I don't know whether you're taking the piss or not.
I'm really not. I think you are good at that, actually.
Bill's always great in the voice. You've got a great cast to work with. You've got, like Liam Neeson is in it, and Patrick. You get to do the Patrick Stewart voice, which that.
Yeah, they're in Excalibur.
Yeah. Liam Neeson is pretty. Well, I mean, they're both pretty young. They're both actually like the same amount of time less than in age than they are now. That makes sense.
Yeah, thanks.
What?
Like, if you take their age now, when they were in Excalibur together, they were the same amount younger than they are now. Both of them were. So they're both kind of young, is what I'm saying.
That's crazy. What a coincidence.
But, still relative to the gap between their ages.
You're saying they're both the same? I can't.
No, Kamal, you're misunderstanding. They're not both the same age. They're different ages.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to like make sure you don't fall into that trap. They're not the same age. They're both younger. But if you wanted to know how young they are, imagine how old they are now, and then subtract the same amount of time from both of their current
I
ages.
understand how time works.
Okay, I'm glad we could.
Oh, good. Okay. But there was some confusion. Yeah.
I just wanted to end off by saying I do have a prediction.
Mhm.
Final prediction is that the next email we get will not be about the Legend of Galactic Heroes. It will be about the Elizabeth line or Crossrail or the Overground logo. 100%.
Fuck.
Oh, definitely, because I'm going to email it right now.
Yeah, I think I invited that.
You shouldn't have said something so stupid.